And this is what we're going to make today, gratin Dauphinoise.
Continuing the Marco Pierre White Maestro series, let's make gratin Dauphinoise, potato Dauphinoise, whatever you want to call it. The BBC Maestro series is a set of masterclasses where different experts from different fields show you in a video course how to do their particular things. Marco Pierre White has 2 different courses on how to be a better cook. I was immediately drawn to it being a potato recipe. I've previously made potato Dauphinoise, it's on this channel, it's probably up there, and you can find it linked below. And I learnt it from a really good chef over at the Waitrose Cookery School, who said you should simmer it in the cream first, and then transfer it to the oven to finish cooking. Marco talks about this in his Maestro series, and says that, there's loads of different ways to do it, and he doesn't have a problem with any of them. He talks about the way that he does it, the way he likes to do it.
Some people steam their potatoes, then add them to their cream. Some people cook their potatoes in the cream. I tend to do it from raw.
Obviously, gratin Dauphinoise is not a complicated recipe. All you're going to need are potatoes, salt, pepper, cream, garlic, nutmeg if you like, and optionally cheese. The description of the recipe and the way he goes about it, just as with the pomme fondant recipe, is typically Marco. He's really, I don't want to say enthused, passionate I think is the word, because he has a very low level energy.
But never forget, the only thing in life that dictates is your palate when it comes to cooking.
Which is kind of strict and you feel like you're getting told off, but at the same time, if you listen carefully, he's telling you some really good stuff. Make sure you're using really good ingredients. Make sure you're tasting as you go. Make sure you're, and this is a slightly odd one, handling it. I guess we would say, be mindful of what you're cooking. Can you touch it, taste it, smell it? These sort of tips are kind of obvious, but when he says them, they really do make sense. Let's give it a go. Let's try out Marco Pierre White's gratin Dauphinoise. So we're going to start by getting the cream mixture ready. That's about 500 ml of cream, a couple of garlic cloves, salt and pepper, all mixed together, a few grates of nutmeg. Marco insists this is optional if it's not your thing. Next we're going to prep up about 1 kilo of potatoes. You've got to use waxy potatoes that hold their shape. If you use floury potatoes like Maris Piper, you'll still get tasty food, but it'll end up disintegrating into a kind of creamy mash. Again, a very nice thing, but not what we're aiming for here. A firm waxy potato, a new potato like a Charlotte or an Anya, should work here. Unfortunately, the time of year I'm buying this, October, my greengrocer only had these small pebble-like ones, but they'll have to do. It just means a lot of peeling. Marco cleverly uses great big ones that are like 6 inches across. I've got to make do with these little ones. And rather than do the mandolin, I'm going to use my trusty Kitchen Whiz Pro. I've set it at about 3mm. Processes 1 kilo of potatoes in about 30 odd seconds. Now they're done, I'm going to rest them on a clean tea towel to take off just some of the surface starch, not to completely wash them off. Marco still wants some starch in there to help glue it all together. And then I'm going to submerge them in the cream mixture and then layer them nicely into that casserole dish.
So question why you do things. Potatoes are going to drink it to the point where they're intoxicated. If I think back to my childhood, my favourite toy is Lego. I like constructing things. And then I moved into the world of gastronomy. What did I do? I turned food into Lego. And today, everything I do is an extension of Lego.
Marco says the 3-star touch is creating excellent presentation and layering them in fish scales. Again, if you're using an extremely large potato like he was, this is really easy to do. I'm using really small potatoes and layering them is a bit of a labour of love, so I'm not going to use quite as much care, but to be honest, I think once it's on my plate, I'm not going to notice the difference. So I'm gradually adding the cream and eventually pouring the rest on top. I'm going to finish with some cheese. Marco suggests using an Italian hard cheese. I'm going to use Comte, a French one, which I happen to have in the fridge and I really like it, so I'm going to pop that on top. Just finishing with a double layer of foil, which I've buttered, covering that over, and that's now gone into my 130, 120 degree oven for about an hour. And in the last 15 minutes or so, I'm going to take the lid off so that it can brown the top. So it has had 18 minutes in the oven, and here we go. No resistance at all. Lovely. Frustratingly, Marco now wants us to cover it and leave it for an hour.
We leave to rest for approx 1 hour. So what happens is potatoes, they become intoxicated with the cream.
So finally we have Marco's finished Dauphinoise. Certainly holds its structure.
If you have dreams and aspirations of winning 3 stars in Michelin, then teach yourself about construction.
Well, there's no denying the flavours that are in there. It's potatoey, it's salty, it's garlicky, it's creamy. But I'm going to be honest, I prefer my method.
Excuse me, you've got one of 2 options. You either say sorry or you go.
One of the big problems you have with the Dauphinoise is that you can't get the seasoning just right. Whereas if you bring it up to the boil in the pan first, you get to check that seasoning of that liquid, which is what I do in my usual method. I'd also, to be honest, prefer it a little bit more wet. You know, it's quite solid. Probably needs to be served with a gravy or something like that. But excellent technique, and as always, completely fascinating how he approaches things. But not quite for me. If you want to find more Marco Pierre White Maestro recipes, I did his potato fondants. They're up there right now. If you want to see how his lemon tart gets on against Heston Blumenthal, check down there. And I'll see you next time.